Hey everyone, thanks for attending. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's 7:03 on Thursday, December the 21st. We're in the Holland Room at Town Hall. I'd like to first start with our land acknowledgement. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands in which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Can I first of all get a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by legislated services?
Yeah.
Irene? Up to Jesse, thank you. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll just call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thanks. Any declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? No. Seeing none. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting of October 19th. I'd like to have a motion to receive those meeting minutes of the 19th. Can I get a motion to receive? Shaheen, thank you. Irene, second.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments on the minutes? No one? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor of receiving the minutes? Opposition? That carries. We have no delegations this evening. We do have a memorandum from the manager of recreation regarding the recreation needs assessment and for persons with disabilities. Could I get a mover and a seconder to put this item on the floor for discussion? Mover? Irene? Seconder, Shaheen, thank you. Okay, and the item is that the memorandum regarding the recreation needs assessment for persons with disability be received, and that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee comments regarding recreation needs assessment for persons with disabilities be received and referred to staff for consideration. So Lisa's here. Lisa, would you like to speak to the item and introduce the consultants for us?
Yeah, thank you. So you may recall back in the spring, we came forward with a memo to this committee, just letting you know that this project, this needs assessment for persons with disabilities was going to be happening. It was an item that was identified in the master plan. And the goal of this project is to identify the programs and services and preferences of persons with disabilities in the town of Aurora, and to develop an action plan. So as I said, it's really focusing on programs and services, not so much our built environment. And we understand that in order to develop programs and services for persons with disabilities, we may need to make some tweaks to our facilities, but we're not looking at, this project is not looking at, like I said, the built environment so much as it is programs and services, and as I said, what tweaks we might need to make depending on what we hear as we go through the process. So we have retained a consulting firm, J Consulting Group, and they are facilitating the development of this needs assessment. We have started work recently in the last month or so, and we have several community engagement and consultation activities scheduled throughout January to March. And final completion expected hopefully around the end of March, possibly into April. So a really robust engagement plan, including surveys, targeted focus groups for individuals with disabilities and community organizations and service providers that serve individuals with disabilities, as well as interviews with key stakeholders, town staff, town council, and of course our advisory committees. So that is what we're hoping to do tonight. We have our consultants with us, and they are going to facilitate a conversation. We've got Jody Ball and Gabrielle Peters from J Consulting Group. So I'll just give you a little bit of background on the two of them who have joined us tonight. Gabrielle Peters is a disabled writer, researcher, consultant, and policy analyst whose holistic approach to accessibility and inclusion integrates the lessons of disability justice, harm reduction, trauma-informed design, and community organizing. She believes we have to move beyond awareness and become intentionally anti-ableist. Jody Ball is a professional planner and facilitator with a passion for bringing people together in conversation and dialogue to ignite ideas and explore opportunities to meet community challenges. Jody has worked with several local governments in many communities across Ontario and Canada, guiding and facilitating efforts to engage communities in local planning initiatives. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Gabrielle and Jody now, who will go through a exercise and a conversation with us.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thanks everyone. Great to be with you this evening. Thank you for making time in your meeting to have us here today. As Lisa stated, my name is Jody. My pronouns are she, her. I am the director at J Consulting Group and very grateful to be able to meet with this group early on in our work to listen to your insights and experiences. I am joined today by Gabrielle Peters, a member of our team. Gabrielle will introduce herself and get things started in a moment. I do just want to take a moment to provide a bit of additional context for our session and more broadly for our work together. We want to acknowledge that person first and identity first language are both used in the disability community. We understand that there are strong preferences based on different experiences, history, and analysis, and therefore, the choice of each person with a disability must be respected. So for the purposes of this project, we do alternate between person first and identity first language. And in this work, we've defined disability as an umbrella term that covers a broad range and variation of conditions, chronic illnesses, impairments, activity or participation limitations or restrictions that may be visible or invisible, permanent, episodic, or temporary. Disability is an evolving term that considers access barriers a person may experience because of the design of the built environment, policy, or program. I also want to mention, as Lisa said, that there are many opportunities throughout our process to provide input into the process. As part of our work, Gabrielle and myself will be facilitating a series of community engagement initiatives. Lisa went through several of them. Just to highlight, in the new year, we will be engaging with persons with disabilities through a few different methods, including a telephone survey, as well as online survey, online focus groups, as well as in-person focus groups. So that'll be a big part of our work starting up in the new year. And the other piece that I'll just highlight that's going on at the moment is collecting a range of pieces of data, different indicators, looking at existing policies that you have at the town, but also more broadly, taking a look at what the literature is telling us about the importance of inclusive recreation. So we're pulling together that research side of things, and then we'll be starting the engagement side of things in the new year. We've done a few things already. We've had some interviews and met with staff and so on, but really getting into it in the new year. And so both of those pieces will come together through our process. So we've got the research and what we're learning from that, and then we've got our engagement and what we're hearing from the community and our stakeholders about that. And those two pieces come together for that needs assessment, outlining the various needs, possible gaps in recreation programming for persons with disabilities across the town. And then we take that information and we go back out and do some consultations again, and then start to prepare that action plan. So we've got a lot of work to do over the next few months. For today, we're hoping that you share your insights and ideas so that we have a better understanding of how we can meet the recreation programming needs of persons with disabilities living in Aurora. So that's a little bit more context from me. I'm going to turn it over to Gabrielle to introduce herself and also get us started in our discussion.
Thank you, Jody. Hi, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Peters, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am speaking to you from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, otherwise known as Vancouver, the city of Vancouver. I take this work that we're doing and this engagement that you are all part of extremely seriously as a disabled person. I regard this as life-saving work, and I'm going to explain that. So there's a poem in the disability community. It's called You Get Proud by Practicing. And it's by a disabled author, poet, and activist, Laura Hershey. It was written in 1991. It's a long poem, and I'm not going to read it all, but I will share a little bit. You do not need to be able to walk or see or hear or use big, complicated words or do any of the things that you just can't do to be proud. A caseworker cannot make you proud, or a doctor. You only need more practice. You get proud by practicing. There are many, many ways to get proud. You can try riding a horse or skiing on one leg or playing guitar and do well or not so well and be glad you tried either way. And it goes on to talk about all the ways that we can learn to be proud, and this is how it ends. Remember, you weren't the one who made you ashamed, but you are the one who can make you proud. Just practice. Practice until you get proud. And once you are proud, keep practicing so you won't forget. You get proud by practicing. Working on this project with Aurora and with Jody and the team has been a real privilege for me. And it's made me reflect on how much of the history of the liberation of disabled people is tied to recreation, leisure, and how much of it remains needing to be changed before we can just take hanging out and doing things for fun for granted. So when this meeting is over, maybe if you have Netflix, or if you know somebody who has Netflix, you could find some time over and on your busy schedules. I know nobody has time, but just watch a film called Crip Camp. And crip is a term we reclaim within the disability community. And it's an American film. It was the Audience Choice Award at Sundance. It was nominated for an Academy Award. So it's a good film. I'm not steering you wrong here. And even though the film is American, the history of what occurred in the film that it documents and shows profoundly changed disabled people's lives in Canada and elsewhere. And what you'll see is that history of the disability rights movement started at a summer camp in 1971. It was at that camp where they felt free and fully human and had fun and a chance to try new things, that the spirit of liberation came together. And they did not want to live their lives in institutions anymore. And they were not going to be excluded from the community. They demanded change, and many things followed, including the historic signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. It is because of folks like them that I live in an apartment, not a nursing home. Although regrettably, many disabled people, including young disabled people, still are sent to live in those. But it all started from recreation. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure everyone has their own Crip Camp, their own moment and opportunity to feel proud and to break free and to liberate themselves from all the things that make them feel ashamed and lesser. And that happens when we take the time to make people feel included and as if they belong. So we'd like to open this by asking everyone to share their name, pronouns, and one or two words that capture the feeling of inclusion for you. And I think we often have better, like, even though whether you're disabled or not, we all know what it feels like to feel excluded. And we all know what it feels like to feel included. So if you could just share one or two words and I'll pass it to somebody, and then if you could pass it on to the next person when you're done. So I'm going to start with the mayor.
Mayor Marakis?
Trying to find that mute button. Sorry. Tom Marakis. A couple words. One word that always comes to mind when I think about inclusion is just acceptance. Another one is to me is listening. And I know I don't know if that's an odd word to use, but I think that when we listen and we actually listen and just don't listen just to listen to take in the information, then we have a full understanding of what and I know that's more than just one word, but that's those are, I guess, two words that come to my mind right away.
Perfect. I think listening is definitely. Can you pass it to?
I'm supposed to pass
Pass
it?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do I'm looking at my screen. Jesse, there you go. You're to my left.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jessie, pronouns she, her. I was actually going to say listening as well. So instead, I will say learning, because listening and learning are tied together, I think. And to gain inclusion, we all sort of need to learn from one another, learn about one another, work with one another, that sort of thing. So I guess learning would be the word that I would use. And I will pass it to Matt.
Matt, are you able to? There we go. Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you. My name is Matt Volpentesta. My pronouns are he, him. And I would use the word empathy and just the ability to sort of understand one another fully from that individual's perspective, I think is important. And I'll pass it to, I'll go to Shaheen.
Shaheen?
Sorry, getting the unmute button. Okay, so I'm Shaheen Maladina, and my pronouns are she, her. To me, it's, I guess from my background, I think of children playing together. So including children from different walks of life, learning from each other, because when they play together, they understand each other's abilities and they help each other. So there's a lot of learning and listening that happens while they play. So to me, having those inclusive playgrounds fully accessible is really important for our community. And I will pass it to, I'm going to pick on, sorry, I'm going to pick on Mr. West. Mr. Ron Reese.
Yeah, thank you for letting me go almost last. Everybody takes all the really great ones. I had empathy on there too, and of course learning. And I think I'm following up with the connections, because I think it's important that people feel connected, and they feel connected to the community, connected to each other. And that's a skill. And I think the other thing that goes along with it is the need for training, because this isn't, I don't think, as natural as it should be. And we ought to make it something that's just a natural thing in every community, particularly in the area of recreation, which is as much social as it is physical and intellectual. So that's what I'm after, I guess, some connection and training. Who's left here? Irene. I've been looking up there and you went here beside me. Your turn.
Okay, my name is Irene, pronouns she, her. Inclusion, when I think of that, I think being sensitive to others. And so that everyone feels a part of, whether it be part of community, part of the event, whatever it is, that, so those things always come to mind.
Okay. Other comments? Gabrielle, do you have something as the next thing that you want to do besides starting us off with that thought-provoking exercise?
Looks like we just lost Gabrielle.
No.
Yes, but I can take over and hopefully she pops back in. She was supposed to have a scheduled power outage at some point today that hasn't happened. So I don't know if that's just happened or if it's just a little glitch and she'll be back. So thank you everyone for participating in that and getting things started today. You know, we do a few of these and each time actually a different word comes to my mind. For me, this time was Gabrielle started by saying, we know what it's like to feel excluded. And so for me, that feeling was alone. And so the word, it's not really a word, I don't think, but what was coming to my mind was not alone. So the sense of feeling not alone. And I think someone said connection. So anyway, those are great. Thank you for that. Oh, she's coming back in. So for the rest of the discussion, I'm going to lead us through a few questions that we have really related to needs in the community that you're noticing, gaps that you might be noticing in the community, and where you might see some opportunities. So feel free to jump in as you will. You can use the raise your hand function if that works for you. And otherwise, we're a pretty small group. So if no one's speaking, please feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in. So the first question I want to ask the group is really around your expectations for our work. So we're developing a recreation needs assessment for persons with disabilities. What do you think that should tell us? So if we think about maybe 3 or 4 months down the road and you receive a draft copy of the recreation needs assessment, what are some things you might be looking for in there? What are you hoping it might tell us? Are there questions that you're hoping it will help answer or provide guidance to?
Anyone? Do you want to go around the room again? That seems to work very well. Has that worked in the past for you, Jody?
We can, sure. Who wants to start?
Let's start with Irene because she went last time, so I think it's fair that she goes through this time, and then you can pass it.
Oh, Irene on the hot seat. Go ahead, Irene.
Okay. Well, you're going to be looking at programs and services, correct?
Yes.
So, but there might be an element, I know you're not covering built facilities, but I would expect that might come up. And if it does, I would hope that would be it'd be included in the report, at least as a sideline without going into it a lot. But I would guess services might be difficult because it'd be town services. So I'm not quite sure how you'll flesh that out because there's many services that people might want that maybe is not within the purview of the town. So I guess I would look to see how you'd handle that. Because you're gonna have a wide range of disabled people who will come at it from very many different areas. And I think how are you gonna funnel it down for something the town can actually action as opposed to social services, other levels of government, I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
I would, I'd like to, programs I think might be a bit more straightforward because it's whatever programs we offer as a town. but I think it might be hard to get it focused, so that's something that I would be looking for, that would be covered in the report. Not sure if that's what you're getting at, but those are things that come to mind when I'm thinking about programs and
Yeah.
services.
No, that's great. And thanks for kicking us off, Irene. And I'll just comment that it is challenging. It's a very broad topic when we talk about persons with disabilities. But to your point around, you know, being a range of things and what will the town be able to do. So the first part of what we will be doing is identifying those needs. So the nice part, I guess, if you will, in looking at what the needs are, is we're not yet thinking about how we might address those needs. So really when we're starting, it's really a listening and learning, and we want to be as comprehensive as we can in identifying those needs. And then as we work through the action plan part, and part of our work will also be to do an implementation plan, that's when we have to start to find ways to address the needs. And then within the implementation phase, it's really around timing, you know, how much time do we need? Are there some things we can do now and some things we need to look at later? Resourcing obviously would be a big component of the implementation, and what can we do now, and what do we need to work on? So yeah, so the first part will really be quite broad and looking at a range of needs. And then, you know, as we develop the action plan, it's distilling some priorities within that. And then coming up with some actions, whether that's through partnerships, looking for additional resources, that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll work our way through that a little bit.
Okay, thanks. Let me just ask Jesse, can you chime in here, and I'll just keep going as I see you on the top there. Jesse, you're up.
Yes, I am. Hi, sorry. Looking for my unmute button. So I expect that there will be a lot of sort of identifying gaps or needs. I just sort of, I suppose this jumps a little bit on what Irene was talking about, but I would expect that there will be a fair bit of comparisons, perhaps to other both public and private organizations that will come up. Anyone who has access to services or programs, perhaps outside the town or through private facilities rather than public facilities and that sort of thing. And I'm sort of hoping that those comparisons come up, because that may provide some useful information, I think, for what maybe can be improved or expanded in terms of what the town is able to offer. And I would assume that most people of all varying abilities are accessing programs from a wide variety of providers, right? Not just through the town. We're doing public, we're doing private, we're perhaps going to other municipalities, that sort of thing. So I think that could prove useful, and I'm hoping that that comes up.
Yeah, I think, and once we have those needs identified as well, Jesse, then we can target, okay, how are other groups or how are other municipalities tackling some of these similar needs? I know we're going to go on to someone new, which is great. I'm just going to add in a component to the question. So in addition to thinking about what you might want to see from our work, also thinking about whether or not you have any initial ideas, if you have seen something in another community that you're thinking, oh, that would be great in Aurora, or whether you've heard someone speak about something that they'd like to see in Aurora that they don't have right now. So I'm just going to broaden the question a little bit, and not sure if anyone wants to jump in next.
Thanks. How about Shaheen? Shaheen, you're next.
All right. So what I would love to see in your report is we have the app with Aurora, the Access app, but we don't have a lot of we don't have like about each park and what's accessible. Like we have one park that is identified as fully accessible, which is Jubilee. But technically, there's a lot of things that I've noticed that are not fully accessible to our community. So I'd like to see like what we can do to like fix, like, you know, go around to our parks that way in our trails. And I'd also like to see, for example, we have like the summer camps for children from the town. And what training does our staff need to make those programs more accessible to children with special needs or even behaviors, just so that we can provide summer camps to more children? And what can we do? Because there's definitely a need for more summer camp spots in Aurora. Because right now, as a parent, if I want to get onto the summer camp programs, I have to literally sit right in front of the computer and click right at that time to get it. So that I'd like to see them more programs for children. And also I'd like to see will there also be a study on the changing demographics of Aurora, because Aurora is changing rapidly. So I'd like to see how you'll address the new demographics of Aurora.
Great, thanks.
Can I just, Shaheen, is it?
Yes.
Hi. It's Gabrielle. I just want to, so around accessibility, you
Yes.
had so many good points you raised there, but you're talking about, like we often talk about, that we want more, wishing there was more detailed information when somebody says this park is accessible, what that means.
Well, on their app, we actually don't have a lot of our parks listed.
Okay.
And so, and not all our facilities have been assessed.
Okay.
And that's from just me using the app here and there. That's what I noticed.
Great.
I haven't looked at the app yet, but my understanding is that's based on assessments that were done. And I guess my question, if somebody knows the answer here, would there be program information, or is that really based on parks, trails, facilities? Okay, Shaheen, I see your head nodding.
No, it's not. It's the app is for like, I mean, the mayor can tell us more because he knows more familiar with the app. But the thing is, what I know, the app tells us, like, for example, it's assessed the town hall. It's assessed certain things, but not programs. So it's a device for residents and community members to see what's on our facilities, what makes it accessible. So that I think that more has to be done on that app so that those people with disabilities can go on the app and find out what they can use, because not all our facilities are on there at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Maracus? Some comments or questions?
Sure. I guess I'll thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll take a different approach to this and go in a different way and talk about some of the things that I'd like to see. And I think, Jody, we might have talked about this previously when we talked, is that I'd also like to, I'd really like to see and have a full understanding of what we already do. That is a good thing that we do from an accessibility standpoint for all our programming, all our facilities, all that stuff. And I mean, we all know no matter how well we do, we can always do better. And we're always looking to strive to do better. But I think that we need to understand our starting point. Where are we at right now as a town? And how are we doing? And what do we need to do now to improve from where we are? And so I really think it's important that we all have that full understanding of where we're at, because I think that you hear a lot of it, I think, through some of the comments and even further out from residents, that some people think that, we only do this much, and some will think, oh, we do a lot. And I think that if everyone has a clear understanding of actually what we do when it comes to accessibility in all these areas, and then we can start to move forward, I think, in a very positive way, and look at implementing some of the things that are suggested through this work. So that would be my comment at this time.
Jody, you have any comments on that? Before we
No,
go?
that sounds great. And absolutely, that's what we hope for too, Mayor Marakis, so that we have that baseline so that we can build some of those strategies. So that'll be part of the data collection. And to your point, Shaheen, understanding the demographics and the current demographic trends and how things are changing. So that will be certainly part of our research that we're doing right now. And that will inform the plan. And I think the baseline, to your point, Mayor Marakis, is very helpful for the town and also for your partners, also for the community organizations, because there's a lot of groups that are doing great things and doing recreational activities and sports and so on. And so sometimes when we share that information, those organizations can use that baseline information to help inform what they're doing as well. And maybe it's to expand a program in a certain area and go after some funding to do that. So that baseline of information is really important for the town, and I think your partners as well.
Thank you. My comments, I guess, are similar to some, but not exactly the same. So I'll piggyback on them. With respect to the surveying of the populations, I'm interested in people, of course, who have lived experience that are being surveyed as participants. But second of all, the support workers, the people, their parents, their family members, and the others, to see what they think is important with respect to both programming and facilities, because we disabled folks have a lot of support mechanisms there, and they are as close to the problem as anyone is, and probably that much closer to the solution. And the other thing I think is important is the existing demographics of who we have in the community. So not just an environmental scan of what we're offering, but what is the extent of the issue here? I know, for instance, with our work with the two school boards here, is that they're very aware of where the people are that have various types of disabilities, whether they be intellectual, emotional, or physical. And they have those supports set up in their schools, and I think they're a good model for these kinds of things. So I really hope we can connect with the school and school boards to see what kind of information they could share to be able to make the survey a little more accurate and a little more targeted. So that's my suggestion on the surveying. The outcome, I'd like to have a broad range of demographics, the types of disabilities, and the types of best practices and solutions that have been used and are being used elsewhere.
Yeah, and I take your point about the importance of also connecting with caregivers and parents. And so that is a group that we are reaching out to in the new year. So we'll have a focus group discussion with that group. We'll be reaching out to our partners to ask them to help promote these activities. So I've made a note of the school boards as well, because I think that's an important one. And we've started some outreach to some other organizations as well. But certainly that is a group that we do want to hear from. So there will be opportunities, and we'll do our best to get that information out as best we can to make sure that people are participating and that we hear from that group.
Thank you. Anyone have any hitchhiked ideas that have come up? You made your comments earlier. Irene, you have something else to add?
Just to build on what you were saying, and maybe someone else, there could be opportunities to partner with other groups who are doing things, or to learn how they're doing it, because the town has finite resources and staff and whatnot. So anything that we can do to partner with other groups who already know how to do it, not reinventing the wheel. And sort of building off those partnerships or creating partnerships if they don't exist.
Great. Good thought. Shaheen? Hand up.
So I'd like to also add to Ron's point about reaching out to the school boards, but I would also, if you could also reach out to York Region Early Intervention, because that will give you an idea of the need, because when early intervention is actually the first thing we do for children, what as educators is we survey, like we do the survey and then we send it off to early intervention. So for example, it would be good to partner, like reach out to them to see what the needs are in Aurora, because they would have the data for you. Because there are a lot of children who have also not been assessed as yet, or that are needing assessment, because there's approximately a backlog of 16 months right now for children.
Thank you. Anyone else want to piggyback on any of these conversations? My comment is, and it's related, I guess, what Irene said a bit, is we do have groups, and maybe my question is going to Lisa to expose this a bit, but is the scope of this for municipal programs only, or are you interested in extending that to sport organizations and other organizations in town that assist in some way? So for instance, we have our Special Olympics group, and they have particular training in the intellectual and emotional disabilities that children have. And I suspect there's a lot of knowledge, skill, and expertise in there. We do have the president of Special Olympics Ontario who lives in this community. The other one is the para sport and the para athletes and the para group, Para Sport Ontario may be another one that has a lot of this information on how to deliver programs, but they're related to sport, not just unsupervised or supervised recreation. So that would be my other comment, seek out people that have the expertise that are doing, and I've written down here best practices, and I don't know if Jody, in your experiences and Gabrielle, in your experiences, the best practices that work in Richmond Hill or Markham or Tofino, they're still best practices. So I'd like to see what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Others? Can't see it. No one hand up. Okay, Jody, do you need to move along, or do you have enough of the information that you want? Do you have another question you want to pose?
I will ask another question if we're okay on time.
Sure.
Okay. Just wondering, some of you have spoken about needs, but I just want to circle back to, in your opinion, what are some needs? So things that I've heard, I heard around training. I heard that. I heard Shaheen, you made a comment around summer camps and programming for children. And I'm just wondering if there's other areas that you that come to mind when you think about, what are the needs of persons with disabilities, the recreation needs, of persons with disabilities right now in Aurora. When I ask you that, what comes top of mind? Are there certain things that come top of mind? And it could be a program like summer camps, but it could also be the delivery of programs. So when we talk about needs and gaps, we're also looking at how are we delivering programs, and are there ways that we can improve the delivery of these programs, whether that's communication, the training, anything else come to mind around needs?
And to just add to that,
Yeah.
not just limit it to children. Okay?
Yes.
Disabled people come in all ages, and youth and young adults and
Yeah.
working age adults and elder. So the whole range of different interests and needs.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Jesse.
I think communication as to what we currently offer, supports that are available, supports that can be made available, what is accommodations that can be made or adaptations that can be made. I'm not sure if that is currently super clear to everyone in the community, or if that information is always conveyed to those people in the community who may require additional supports. Like Shaheen was talking about summer camps, for instance. Do all residents know that there is one-on-one support available for summer camp participants that require that? I'm not sure about that, and in all of our programs. So I think that might be something, even for what we currently offer, not even with changes or improvements that may be made, just sort of communicating to residents what is available to them is
Yeah,
something that would be useful.
for sure. Great point. Thanks, Jesse.
Shaheen, did you have your hand up?
Yep. So, I feel like living as a resident in Aurora, we have a lot of amazing programs that we deliver, that the town delivers for the community, like special events, you know, the farmers market. And but I'm not a person of special needs, but so I don't know what is required to help other community members. So I think what was brought up about knowing our baseline is really important, because when I look at events and like that we do in the town, I feel like we meet a lot of requirements. But I do feel, and our seniors have a great program at the Aurora Seniors program, Aurora Seniors area. So I guess I think I'm looking for you to tell us now, where are we lacking? I know from a childcare perspective what we're lacking, but I don't know about the rest of the community. So I think that needs to be shown to us. You know, what can we do? Like I know that like our seniors have like trips on the bus, and it's great. But again, I don't know what's lacking, but I do know from a communication perspective, and that's why I was asking about demographics, is sometimes our communication is not in different languages. So maybe we're not capturing all the seniors in our town because of communication not being sent out in different languages.
Shaheen. And yes, we will help identify some of those gaps. I'm just asking if there's anything from your experiences that comes top of mind. So
The only thing that comes top of mind is we need a fully accessible playground right now. That is something that we don't have. I don't feel that Jubilee's equipment, it's not, you can't even take a wheelchair on the mulch. So that is something that really needs to be addressed, because we only had one park that was fully accessible, but it belongs to the York Region School Board. And, you know, we need a replacement.
Other comments? I appreciate that, Shaheen, because I was speaking just with Allison Hughes today about our accessibility in parks, and her view is that, well, it's accessibility, you can get into the park, but the ability to actually use the equipment with intention to increase the fun, the play, and all the rest of it is not there. And maybe that's a supervision kind of a thing, but also a learning for the caregivers that here's how you can use the equipment properly. So it's not just getting into it, it's using it with intention. And I think that's really important. The other thing I underlined here were priorities, and someone mentioned it before. And only Jody and Gabrielle can probably tell us what needs to be done first, second, third, fourth, given our realities of the world. And I'd like to see something that goes out 3, 4, 5 years from now, so that we don't have to do it all now, but we can start working towards a target of some kind, some number of years down the road. And I can't tell what that is. You probably can tell what that is, Jody and Gabrielle, knowing what your experience is.
Yeah, so usually planning works on at least a 5 to 10 year framework. Having said that, I would say usually when I anticipate that the recommendations we make, that if we're talking about programs and services, would ideally be within 5. But if there are recommendations that require infrastructure type changes, then that could go longer. But certainly, to the question, our implementation plan will outline timelines and what we expect. Are some of those things that can happen right away, hopefully, and then some things that are going to take a little bit longer to put into place.
There comments from the group before we move along?
Anything else that's top of mind that you want to make sure that Gabrielle and I take back with us and we look at, consider?
So do you have a few more questions that you want to ask of the group?
We've gone through most of the questions. I guess I just want to leave a space to see what else might be coming to mind when you think about that recreation needs assessment for persons with disabilities. What you might are there ideas that you've seen elsewhere that you think you'd like to see in Aurora? Are there other gaps that you think you want to mention? Just anything else that you want to make sure that our team takes back with us as we continue in our planning and in our research.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions on that from anyone in the group? Some best practices you've seen, things that Jody just mentioned? For me, I've seen facilities that have been developed for various types of disabilities and people who supervise them. And I think a lot of it's going to depend upon the numbers that we see. Like, we just don't know the extent of the need quite yet in terms of people. My question is, what is the current thought and of integration versus segregation in programming with people? Because I know in sport, we want to have people that have disabilities working with people that are able-bodied and doing all those things. And so is that a question you ask people, or is there a best practice in that you're already aware of? Because I'd like to get my head around that a bit.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer on the best practice. And Gabrielle, please jump in. All I will say is that it is a question that is part of our discussion questions with persons with disabilities and within the survey. So we are looking at getting some thoughts on that. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
No, sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No.
I was gonna say that, the thing is that you really have to settle in to realize is that a lot of times when we're talking about best practice with disability, By the time that you are calling it a best practice, it's outdated. We are in a very evolving area. In my lifetime, people like me were not in your schools. We're not in the community, not sitting on city council advisory councils. You know, I'm now on the Vancouver City Planning Commission. I think probably might be the first, but we've had a wheelchair user mayor. We've had, you know, I was so, but this is all very recent in terms of historical and certainly in terms of institutional history and facilities. So we look at in terms of integration versus segregation, which is a really good question around recreation, because in general, the answer is inclusion, period, you know, not separate anything, because separate doesn't equal. But with recreation, sometimes there are things where it's, you know, like if you're looking at like wheelchair tennis or sitting volleyball or sensory swims or various things like that, where it's might be better to identify it and it around sort of accessibility needs, around sort of those interests. And those would be separate. But more and more, the idea primarily is that the best practice is respecting the autonomy of a disabled person. And even the research that's been done in European Union, elsewhere, United States, around children has been finding that disabled children, looking into how disabled children define inclusion, as opposed to the adults around them, what matters to them, what's important to them. So I think that it's exciting area because there are some standards that you definitely want to hit as your baseline, but then there's a lot of room to exceed those. And there's a lot of emerging best and better practices. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it's helpful. And if I can, I guess, just have another follow-up is your work going to identify barriers? Barriers could be financial barriers, but I know when people are going to and from recreation, there's transportation barriers that exist. There may be equipment type of barriers. So will your work include those kinds of recommendations and concepts for us to mull over?
Well, as you know, the holistic approach to accessibility looks at all of those things, right? So it's interesting that you raise that because I'm going to give a bad example from my city. Was a new community recreation center built around the Olympics. It's one of the most accessible in the city, although there are no actual wheelchair accessible gyms in Vancouver, by the way, but it's one of the more accessible community centers. And there's absolutely no way to access it by transit accessibly. If you can walk and go through this incredibly inaccessible route from transit to there, it's not too bad, but it's not. So, you know, it's kind of like, well, there's this center that's really not accessible to get to. So of course that's part of it, but will be dependent on, you know, that's certainly feedback that I think that we'll be seeking to hear. And
Okay, thanks. It helps.
Yeah.
Irene.
Just in, I don't know quite from where, but a number of comments. You've restricted the mandate, if you like, to programs and services. But when you're talking about inclusion, the accessibility of physical accessibility and things like sufficient parking close enough too. I don't see how you can avoid looking at those as well. Otherwise, this would be only a partial report on disability, because it doesn't address some of the fundamental things about how you get into the building or how you park close enough to get to the playground or whatever. So right now, I think our focus being only programs and services is maybe not quite adequate, because I don't know, you got that other piece that needs to be looked at.
Well, let me ask Lisa if I will, and maybe Jody and Gabrielle, are parks a separate entity on accessibility, or is this on recreation only? So for instance, are Jody and Gabrielle going to be working on the parks with the Parks Department to look at the accessibility of playgrounds, of parking, of all those other kinds of things? Or are we, the scope of this, just focused here on recreation programs and services, but it's going to be town-wide and it's going to go beyond this?
Yeah, so the scope is programs and services only at this time. We know that it, the built environment and the the parking and the general accessibility is going to come out, I'm sure, in conversation. That's sort of the next step, because that's a much bigger piece that requires bigger resources, really. So in terms of looking at the parks and that sort of thing, again, not really part of the scope of this. Will again come into play when we talk about, we run summer camps in parks. So there's going to be a connection, I'm sure, when we start talking about programming, because we do programming in parks. So I'm sure those conversations are going to come to light. I hope they come to light. End up sort of being a part of this report. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right, Lisa. I know that we are going to hear where there are barriers with respect to spaces and places when we talk about programming. So our job when we're doing our engagement will certainly be to capture that. I think when it comes to developing the actions, that's where we have to take a look. So my mind's going to something like skating. If somebody feels that there's a gap in skating for themselves and they are a wheelchair user, for example, and so we're identifying that need that's come up in the community. And then if we look and we say, well, it's not, the barrier isn't that, or to address the barrier doesn't mean that we just need to create a skating program. It means, you need to look at your infrastructure and your arenas and your rink. So that's where at some point they are going to merge. But our focus really is on how can we improve the programming and recreational needs of persons with disabilities within the town of Aurora. Knowing that we're going to hear that there may be barriers in accessing those spaces, for example.
Yes, and I just wanted to add that those barriers, like accessibility barriers within the physical environment, are certainly, I'm a wheelchair user, so they're certainly very real, but so can be program barriers and stigma or communication barrier, things that just make somebody hesitant to, perhaps you have a wonderful program, but they just there's something about it that they didn't think it was appropriate for them because they weren't sure they would belong. Would you be willing to adapt it and so that they can do it in a slightly different way? So those are, those can open up a lot of avenues for broadening inclusion without a lot of that are very quick wins, with minimal expenditure.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gabrielle.
Thank you. Any other comments before we call a vote to receive and provide the information? Any last words? in my view, I think Shaheen mentioned something was communication in a variety of languages. We have a very diverse population and a lot of different tongues. So I think it's important for us to be able to communicate and then work on the capacity issues, how we build the capacities, and then ultimately work on sustainability of these programs, because it's one thing to get things started, but to be able to have such a good program that it sustains itself is really important. So with that, let me just call a vote to receive the report and provide the comments to Lisa and the staff. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Do we have any other informational items, Lisa or Jody, or anything anyone else wants to provide? Nothing more? Any new business that anyone wants to bring up for the future? A pending list? Hearing none? No? Okay, let me call a motion to adjourn then. Can I get a motion to adjourn from Irene, Shaheen, seconder, all in favor? Thank you, that's carried. I want to thank Jody and Gabrielle for the work and all the committee for your thoughts and comments today. They'll all be recorded and they'll be sent off for a staff report. I appreciate your time tonight. And everybody have a happy holiday.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you and happy
See
holidays.
you.
And Mayor, I hope your wisdom tooth feels better soon.
Yes.